That is how you respond. 1-1, the Colts after 2 weeks. I think that's what, at least I thought. Definitely not how I expected the first 60-minute sessions of week 1 and week 2 to go for the Colts. But nonetheless, 1-1 football team and a fresh winner, 28-11. I always look to the scoreboard on Sunday and like, man, that looks weird. Well, that's what happens when you have a safety and the Vikings suck. So a really nice performance, Chris. I thought really one of the better performances, especially defensively, we've seen from Matt Eberflus in this unit. It was so needed, so necessary. We'll hit on that. And as always, I'm Kevin Bowen. That's Chris Presley across the way. Good weekend?
Yeah, great weekend. It was my mother's birthday. I know it was your birthday as well, so
Yep.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Yeah, 31 is not 21. I will say that in terms of how you celebrate it. But, yeah, it was a great weekend. Wife did a lot of nice things, and Rosie had a large impact on things. And, man, yeah, I mean, I saw that first diaper on Friday when it was my birthday, and I'm like, woohoo, this is a lot different than I'm used to. But that's life, and had a great time. Beautiful fall weather.
It is.
Here in the Indy area, and Notre Dame rolled.
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Open was decent for a while. Not really on Sunday, but let's get into it, Colts. Boy, can go in so many different ways here. Before we get into what I liked, what I didn't like, just general overall thoughts in the game. Like I said, that's how a team that has aspirations to play meaningful football in January should respond.
Yep.
You know, we can debate, and the Vikings got to be the biggest disappointment in the NFL, honestly, after 2 weeks, just with how ugly of performances they've had. But still, I mean, anytime you control a game in the NFL like that and do it really for the entire game in every single facet, that is notable. And I think we need to commend the Colts. We don't need to have these grand proclamations of, that's a Super Bowl team, that's a top 10 team, top 10 drafting team after 2 weeks. No, I think what I saw from the Colts yesterday was a team that's capable of playing some pretty good football. And, again, defensively making those changes. That wasn't surviving and holding on and praying that you're 1-1 after 2 games. That was a convincing, controlled game in every facet, really.
Do they still look at it this year, Kevin, like the motto from a few years ago, the 1-0? They just take it game by game, just try to win. Go 1-0 each week.
Yeah, and obviously that's the most tired cliche you could ever imagine. I totally get it. When you're in that building, that's exactly how you have to operate. And with how injuries rise in this league, week to week is so different, the storylines. It's what we love about the NFL. It can be maddening at times, but it's certainly what we love about this league. But, I mean, just look at how different your approach was on the defensive side this week from what we saw and just the amount of playmaking. Something that stood out to me, Chris, I feel like early in the game is, that Mo Alley-Cox drop interception. That can be such a jolt in life for Minnesota, and yet you still were able to stomp on them and kind of be like, no, we're in control of this game. We just had a dominant 16-play drive that should have ended in points. Here we are going to continue to keep up that momentum and make those plays. We won't talk about Phillip Rivers a whole lot on today's podcast. And that's exactly what I think Frank Reich was meaning after the game and saying, this is the blueprint of what we want. You don't put all this on the quarterback's plate, all this on his shoulders of saying, go chuck it 46 times and things like that. I think that's more what he was getting at from a blueprint standpoint. So, there are things that we'll get to and what I didn't like, that there's room for improvement with this football team. But, again, you responded from some early adversity in this game. You responded from early adversity in week 1. You handled your business in a 60-minute performance that is really one of the more impressive ones I've seen, particularly defensively, in the Frank Reich era.
I love the way that they controlled the clock again and really dominated the line of scrimmage from the offensive side of the ball. What stood out to you? What did you like?
Well, I would say the first thing just in general was what we saw from the first snap defensively.
Yeah.
It was stickier. It was disrupting the timing more. It was, it was, and I tweeted this about midway through the third quarter. It was a perfect example to me, Chris, of when you disrupt timing, you challenge wideouts, you force difficult throws early. Now Kirk Cousins gives you a gift, later on in the game, or he feels a little bit more pressure, and it's not in this great rhythm. I think back to the Kenny Moore interception, where he threw behind, I think it was the Johnson kid, on just a little bit of a simple crossing route that usually is easy timing for a guy like Cousins. But no, he doesn't have that same rhythm. He's a little bit rattled, a little bit flustered, and he throws a little bit behind Johnson, and boom, Kenny Moore is in position to make that play. Even on that first drive, I mean, Adam Thielen made some grabs that you're just like,
yeah.
Shit. I mean, that's a stud making stud-like plays. But think about how much more difficult those catches were for Adam Thielen to make. Those were not easy grabs whatsoever. And that is when I saw early on, and I'm up in that, bird's eye press box view of seeing the entire field, and I'm, pretty much seeing, 8, 9, maybe even 10 guys in the box consistently. Like I saw a little bit more of that. Okay, the DBs are up close to the line of scrimmage. I was encouraged by the first drive of just like, all right, they're making things more difficult. That is all I asked for, of disrupting the timing. Don't let Cousins get comfortable back there. And the numbers just back it up. It's the number that stands out the most to me is 9 passes defensed.
Yeah.
So 9 pass breakups, 9 times your hand was on the ball that forced an incompletion or a pick. That's in 26 pass attempts. I mean, 1 incompletion last week.
Exactly.
And you get 9 times. I mean, that is the epitome of defensive playmaking when it becomes pass defense time. And that's, again, every unit impacting you. Man, it was a really, really good performance. It was the altering of the approach that we talked about last Wednesday on the second podcast of the week. I wrote about it. It was changing it up. And it was necessary. It was needed. It should have been in the game plan week 1, but you move on and you make some changes. I thought a player that, no one will really mention, but kind of set the tone early for me was the Vikings get that 1st and goal early on when Danico Autry commits the penalty that, unfortunately, that's, life in 2020 in the NFL. That's going to be a penalty every time. You had a reserve defensive lineman in the game, Taylor Stallworth, make 2 straight stops inside the 10-yard line on run plays. And it's a little thing we'll overlook, just like we'll overlook Braden Smith, pouncing on the fumble when Yannick Ngakoue, strip sack there in the second half. But that play set the tone of defense holds, force the field goal. Minnesota gets a touchdown there, and that can totally change the whole complexion of the game. So I thought a big play there from Stallworth. The fact that Thielen didn't have a catch after the first drive, not one.
Yeah.
Not one catch. 5 targets the rest of the game, and again, not a single reception for their best player. You weren't even close to a turnover last week, Chris. Weren't even close.
Nowhere.
And you had 3 of them. You got your hand on several other balls. I mean, there were a couple plays that stand out to me, like Kenny Moore gets beat and gets his hand in there on Kyle Rudolph. I mean, that's a big 20, 30-yard gain that totally would have flipped field position if nothing else. Xavier Rhodes gets beat on a play that Thielen, Cousins to Thielen, and there's Xavier, again, 6'1" frame, last second, boom, is able to get that pass deflection. Those are the plays that we just didn't even see at all week 1.
No.
And I think it started with your approach. Man, it was really good. Cousins was so rattled, and by far his lowest passer rating of his career. This guy's started nearly 100 games.
Yeah, and he's making a lot of money.
Yeah, making a ton of money. Better in the run game. Won't look perfect in the box score. I mean, Cook still had 4.5 a carry, but I probably would have signed up for that before the start of the game. I thought you set the edge better early on, so.
Yeah, I was a little shocked when I first looked at the box score at the end of the game and saw our leading tackler was Kenny Moore and Leonard with 6 apiece, but then you remember back to how many 3-and-outs that defense forced yesterday.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a lot of tackles when you're only on the field 3 times a possession.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned Leonard and Moore. I mean, I thought your stars gave you more. I thought it was an all-pro effort from Buckner. I mean, 4 quarterback hits is a number that's just eye-popping. What he did to that poor dude's family, the right guard. I mean, Jesus, that should be illegal. And for the second week in a row, Justin Houston should be giving a gift to DeForest Buckner for saying, thank you for that sack.
Yep.
I was glad they gave Buckner a half sack there. Sometimes they can get finicky. If that's late in the season and Robert Mathis is going for the NFL sack record, They might give that full one in the home building to Mathis. But, I mean, like you said, Chris, I'm looking at the box score right here. 4 first downs on the first series of the game. Second quarter, they had 5 series. 3 and out, safety, 3 and out, interception, 4 and out, and that was it. That was an interception. So 1 first down and 5 series in the second quarter.
Love seeing that.
I mean, you should have been up a lot more, you know?
Yeah.
You're just like, you're kind of thinking, oh, boy, you're playing with fire here. But did a nice job then again in the third quarter as well. And, yeah, I mean, Leonard was, man, his speed was on display. Just great pursuit angles and, you know, certainly the secondary. We'll get into Julian Blackmon when we talk about Malik Hooker's injury. And Kenny Moore, again, you know, pass defensed and making stops in the open field. And really, really good. Kudos to Matt Eberflus, deservedly so. We were critical of him week 1. That was an embarrassing performance by the pass defense. But in this league, we saw the owner.
Yep.
He tweeted out the video, folks. I said it was a lot. I mean, once we saw that video, stone cold lock, that was a guarantee the Colts are going to win. But seriously, you have to respond. 1 week cannot define you in this league.
Nope.
Insert every coaching cliche here. But the Colts bounced back in a big way, which was great to see.
And we loved what we saw from that draft class of this year. At least I know I did. I know you did. I know the fans just following along on Twitter. Just like the 2018 draft class, it seems, and it's only 2 games in, we might have found some diamonds in the rough.
You know, let's start with the workhorse. It was a, you know, I said 15 to 20 carries wouldn't shock me at all. And obviously when you get into that game and you get a lead, it starts to creep up. But 10 carries on the opening drive? Or maybe it was 11. I don't know. It was an absurd amount. It was the most carries in the NFL in the first half. I think he had 18 for the first half, Jonathan Taylor. Most carries in the NFL in the first half in 2 years. I mean, Derrick Henry didn't even do that last year. It was Henry in 2018. It was Frank Reich saying, hey, guys, yeah, I effed up week 1. Passed it too much. This Minnesota D-line might be worse than Jacksonville's D-line. And, yeah, we're going to ground it, and we're going to pound it, and we're going to try and just break their will. And you did that. It was not the home run that maybe we thought from Taylor, but I thought it was like 230 pounds of Taylor, just time and time. Methodical, 15-degree day in Camp Randall, and Minnesota's going to hang around for a half, and, you know, eventually it's just going to be like, oh, yeah, he is over 100 yards. It's just one of those type of games for Jonathan Taylor. I think he can carry this workload. I tried to drive that point home last week. He's got the makeup to be able to put that on his shoulders, and I didn't think it was taxing for him or overbearing for him or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, that first drive, it looked like my high school football team giving the ball to William Stubbs every play, just like, oh, yeah, I don't really know if we trust the quarterback, but I sure as hell don't trust their D-line. And about the only unit that is healthy right now for us is the O-line, so why not ride them? So great work by Taylor. And Frank Reich made it clear. Look at the snap counts.
Yeah.
Pittman, 25 more plays than Hilton. Pascal, 17 more plays than Hilton. That's because they wanted to run it.
And it sounds like such a small thing, but what I love is how Taylor falls forward.
Yeah.
Once like as he's going to the ground, he's going forward. He's still getting an extra yard or two just on the tackle.
Yeah, you aren't stuffing him and he's falling back. You aren't tackling Kevin Bowen. You know, it's not. You know, this is a grown ass man that you're trying to tackle. And I thought the O-line did a better job with establishing the line of scrimmage. The 4th and 1 early, the hurry up. I mean, boom, that was easy. Just better in short yardage. And again, wasn't the prettiest of highlight runs in the open field like we will see eventually from Taylor, but it was methodical, workmanlike, got it done. A couple more rookies I want to mention. Pittman, yes, got to clean up the penalties. You know, that's something that I feel like you don't love there. But, man, the 4 catches in the first half were big, all of them. I mean, the one saved a turnover probably. Harrison Smith, who was all over the field yesterday, one of my favorite players ever at Notre Dame. You know, he gets his hand on a ball, and Pittman just shows that frame. And, Chris, it was third down. It was red zone. It was him showing up 4 for 37, I think it was. That's not going to win you a fantasy title, but it's going to get the job done for you.
You saw the frame, too, on the one that was behind him where the corner was trailing and put his hands out like he was about to pick it, but Pittman was able to tap it up in the air.
That's what I was talking about.
Kind of remind me of that Reggie Wayne in the AFC where the ball was in the air for so long. You're like, come down.
Yeah, 100%. That potential fumble there. Really, really good work by Pittman early on. He was iffy to play. Didn't practice on Friday. Got hurt in Thursday's practice. And then lastly, because I'll slot in a hot rod with the special teams group when we talk about them. But how about Julian Blackmon? I mean, the fact that he played. I asked Frank on Friday, I'm like, so Julian Blackmon's not ruled out? I kind of went there, and he's just like, yeah, we'll see. And let's not get it lost. And I was up. Rosie Bowe had me up early this morning, so I was able to watch, a good amount of rewinding stuff, going back and looking at it. Julian Blackmon had a big role for this football team before Malik Hooker got hurt on Sunday.
Yep.
I mean, he was in sub packages. He played over half the defensive snaps. I see the instincts. I see a guy that found the ball a lot. I think maybe you texted me or tweeted it or something. I know you like what you've seen from Blackmon so far. It's 30 snaps. Not going to crown the kid, but how many months removed from the ACL?
Yeah.
And he didn't look tentative at all to me.
Nope.
So good work from him. And, I guess I'll touch on more of that with kind of the Hooker injury and when we get into Twitter questions.
Well, you mentioned it, Hot Rod. We want to see some of those field goals turn into touchdowns, but a great bounce-back game from him and a nice job by Rhodes downing that punt. Just a lot of things on the special teams that you can't look past.
No, not at all. And let's start with Hot Rod. 6 of 6, 4 for 4 on field goals. 44, was that the long? I think it was. Chris, his makes look good, really good. And I don't want to get too kicker technical here, but you kind of do after last year. And, I never got every time the ball came off his foot, I'm like, all right, that's going in. It was never like, look good. Nice bounce back for him, certainly. But overall, special teams wise, Luke freaking Rhodes. It's the play of the game, honestly. It's I'm gonna pull it up here. It's what were you? You had the Alley Cox pick. It was 7-3. Okay. Hell, was it the first punt of the season? Yeah. First punt of the season, 7-3. And your drive stalls out, kind of fringe field goal range. It would have been, 58, 59 that I'm looking at it. Probably too far for Blankenship. So you decide to kick it, and Rhodes, as a long snapper, makes that play and downs it at the 2. And that's hidden yardage. That gets Pat McAfee excited. It's a play that literally saves 18 yards. So think about it as an 18-yard completion, an 18-yard sack, whatever you want to think. That would be crazy, but you know what I mean. And it sets up the safety. Now it puts the Vikings behind the chains. Now it limits their playbook. Now all of a sudden they come out, they go, a little 3-yard gain, and then they get a holding penalty or some sort of offsetting penalties. Yeah, Rudolph and Malik Hooker had the offsetting penalties. Thielen incomplete, and boom, there's Buckner and Autry making the play that really, I think, changed the game from there. Then you were always playing from the multi-score lead, and just what a great play from Rhodes, and dominating field position all game long. It's one of the more eye-popping average drive starts that you'll ever see. Vikings average drive start for the game, 10 drives, their own 20-yard line. Colts average drive start, 10 drives as well, their own 45-yard line.
I mean,
you're given a 25-yard head start every single drive. Vikings had 10 drives. They started on their own 22, 5, 20, 2, 25, 30, 24, 25, 27, 25. I mean, the Vikings couldn't cross the street yesterday, let alone, try and move the ball down the field in 80-yard drives. So awesome job. I like kind of how Rigoberto Sanchez isn't booming the ball in the end zone. They're kind of just setting up for returns, and they're sneaking out 5-7 yards here and there. If we tackle them at the 18 or the 22, it's just little stuff like that I know Frank Reich had a really big emphasis on special teams in the preseason or in training camp, and we're seeing that. So this was a complete effort, like you said, in just about every way besides the red zone, finishing off those drives. But defense and special teams, how do you not give them both an A?
Yeah, you have to. Great week, great bounce back win, a lot of things to like. But like every week, there are some things that we want to touch on, things that you didn't like. And the first one we want to talk about is the glaring one, and that's the injuries.
Yeah, at first, it started with the Rocky Scene thing. And you're kind of like, wait, what's going on here? The stomach illness before the game. He's not on the COVID list as of now. It'll be something to monitor. I think the report was he didn't have a fever, but he showed up at the stadium, had to be transported to a hospital. Just odd, weird.
Yeah.
Just peak 2020, honestly. And putting that one to the side, let's talk about the two big ones, Campbell and Hooker. We'll start with Campbell. Hearing him audibly scream, cry, whatever you want to call it, just really just struck me. And I'm sure it was just scared, freaking out, imagining the worst. Hopefully the Ian Rappaport tweet, mentioning, no ACL tear is true. Frank Reich said after the game it looked bad. I thought it was a pretty clean hit. How else do you tackle in the NFL? But, man, you just feel for the kid.
You do. Absolutely.
Awful luck. He was not injury-prone in college. I think that's the thing that we forget. Malik Hooker had some. Hell, T.Y. Hilton had some injuries at Florida International. Campbell, I don't think he missed a game his final 3 years at Ohio State. So this wasn't the concern. We're recording this right now. Literally, as we talk about this segment, it's 10:35 a.m. Monday morning. By the time you listen to this, there'll probably be some more concrete information on it. All I'll say is this, Chris. When the Colts initially listed him as questionable to return, not out, I'm like, all right, maybe that's a decent sign. If you do the ACL test right there manually, you probably rule him out.
Yep.
Anyways, you're like, all right, you're not going in the game if we think you tore your ACL. But, we're going to have an MRI to confirm it. So, listening to Frank Reich talk about it after the game, first off, they love Paris Campbell as a human being. Secondly, Frank Reich knows what he means to this offense. We have talked about it endlessly. There are unique football players in this football team.
Yep. Guys
that are different than any other player in their position group. Paris Campbell's close to the top of that list. Out-snapped, out-targeted T.Y. Hilton week one. Hell, look at the play he got hurt on.
Yeah.
Jet sweep. Get him a touch. Second play of the game. Get him a touch. Get the Vikings defense moving horizontally because we're going to pound Taylor up the gut all day long. Just sucks, hamstring, hernia, hand, foot, 3 surgeries last year, the car crash. Where do you begin? In such a matchup-driven league, Chris, there is not a plug-and-play replacement for him.
Nope.
So you hope that it's MCL, I don't know, dislocated knee. Well, I don't know. Whatever is not a year-long absence is what you're hoping for at this point with Paris Campbell. It's just a crushing blow to this team. Like I said, matchup-driven league means so much. Phillip Rivers needs these guys. He needs these sort of athletes around him to help this offense reach its potential. And then, selfishly, because as we always do on this podcast, one eye looking ahead, how can you say with concrete confidence that Paris Campbell's a definite, unquestioned future piece of your team moving forward?
Right.
You think that and you hope that, but, it's a long injury list for him right now. Yeah. It's tough. And then you're predicting, T.Y. Hilton in a contract year. And we've talked about how the Campbell season would impact what I think a Hilton contract would look like. Those things that you get into it. So we'll touch more on it on Wednesday's pod. I know we got some Twitter questions about it as well. But God, it sucks. Sucks for him.
And Hooker?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to go back and watch it. I can't find the play. I think he got hurt on the safety, but I need the all-22 version to look at it. I assume it was non-contact. I know Colts radio mentioned that he was, in tears on the sideline. Obviously, an Achilles test you can probably see it pretty easily. People like to, I think, rip Malik Hooker, and I think the rip is more so because he hasn't lived up to the 15th overall pick. I think when you just honestly evaluate him, he has not lived up to the 15th overall pick, but he's also not a terrible safety by any means. I mean, through the first 2 weeks, the Colts really haven't allowed a big play vertically. He's a big reason, part of that. So, where it hurts you, Chris, is kind of how I view Marlon Mack at running back. I don't think the drop-off is massive. I think the drop-off from Mack to Taylor is less than the drop-off to Hooker to whatever, Blackmon to Tavon Wilson, George Odom, whatever you decide to do at safety. But where it worries me is this. I look at safety and look at the secondary in general, and you're worried about the depth, more so at corner than safety. But think about today's NFL. It's such a pass-happy league. You want to have multiplicity. It's the same thing I talk about with Matt Eberflus. I want to have 6 different game plans that I feel comfortable using in a given week.
Yeah.
So Sam Darnold doesn't know what the hell I'm using. I mean, hell, against Sam Darnold, you could probably play with 8 defenders and get away with a win. But you know what I'm getting at here. I want to be able to use Julian Blackmon and be like, oh, you were corner in college. Let's try this. Let's see if you can go batch up in the slot against whoever down the road.
Right.
Some tight end or something like that. And I guess that's where you lose some things of it's not just the big play stuff that he wasn't allowing. It's the, man, how multiple can you be? How sub-packagey can you be? Do I want Julian Blackmon playing 100% of the snaps starting next week?
Right.
That's a big burden even to throw on him. So that's where you really, I think, are hurt by this loss. And Blackmon looked really good. Again, the instincts were there. When he said a few weeks ago, I feel about 95%, probably a little bit more. I certainly saw that. I saw a guy that looked pretty close to 100%. Now it's just the wear and tear of week in and week out, potentially playing a starter role. And it just you're losing a little bit of creativity with this injury. So we'll see later today if we get confirmation there.
And another topic, this goes to your hit and misses article that's up on 1075thefan.com right now, and that's T.Y. Hilton's play these first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest individual disappointment through the first 2 weeks is T.Y. Hilton. The drop, what a great ball by Rivers. Man, we talked about arm strength last week. What a beautiful ball. Beautiful ball from Phillip. Sun, shade, I don't know. It looks terrible when you watch it on TV, just the glare and everything.
Yep.
And I know it's not ideal, but T.Y. Hilton's played in that stadium for 9 years. You catch the ball. Flat out catch it. It's not only the amount of drops, Chris, it's like the quality of the drops.
Right.
Touchdown. 4th down last week. Final drive of the game. I mean, he's had 3 drops this year. He had 3 drops all last year. He had 4 drops the year before that when he played, I think, virtually every game in 2018 or pretty close to it. And what worries me, too, is this is healthy Hilton.
Yeah.
When he came back last year and played on that short week in Houston, and he had the 2 drops, you kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt, he hasn't really practiced much, this and there's no excuse there. So really, really disappointed so far. If I'm going to find a silver lining, and I hope this doesn't confuse people, but this is where I'll find a little silver lining in this. If you were going to tell me through 2 weeks T.Y. Hilton has, 7 catches for 60 yards and an ugly catch percentage, it's got to be under 50%. My first question would be to you probably is, oh boy, is he not separating? Is he not creating any space? Is he not getting open?
Mm-hmm.
He's getting open.
Yeah, he is.
So that's where I have hope of this is not he's about to turn 31. He's had the injuries. He's just old. This isn't that. I mean, hell, he was wide open on the touchdown, or what should have been a touchdown. And part of that, I think, is, again, play action. Boom, you're able to hit it deep. Hands have been reliable for him. Mm-hmm. So that's where I have a little silver lining of, like, he's usually a good catcher of the football. That's where I have a little bit of, like, okay, there's some optimism. This is not just he looks like Reggie Wayne coming off the ACL. He looks like Andre Johnson at the age of 35, whatever he was. This isn't that.
Yeah.
But you're just used to him making play. You're used to him doing what Adam Thielen did on the first drive, where he's just making stupid catches. That's what you're used to out of Hilton. So, Bears monitoring, because this offense, without Campbell, hello, you got to get Hilton going ASAP. Vertical passing game will be the difference. It was a great blueprint to how you're able to win on Sunday, but Chris, that Vikings team will not be playing in the month of January. Not to break any news in this podcast, but to get to meaningful football in January, T.Y. Hilton's got to be a lot better, especially if Paris Campbell's going to be out. Right.
Anything else you want to touch on before we jump into Twitter questions?
No, I think that covers everything. Like you said, this is our usual what I liked, what I didn't like. We have a hits and misses piece up on the site. And, let's get into Twitter questions.
All right. Como Joe was unable to watch or listen to the game against Minnesota yesterday. What was the difference between games 1 and 2 that contributed most to winning game 2?
Boy, well, we certainly just hit on several of them. Again, closer to the line of scrimmage for that defense. I will start there. It wasn't all press man, and I've never said it needs to be all press man. It's disrupt timing. Your zone can still disrupt timing early in routes. Bump.
Yep.
Just disrupt the timing. It's a broken record, but we've had to say it so often. I thought there were smaller gaps in the zone. I talked about that Kenny Moore interception earlier. In an ideal world, Cousins, I think, would have led Johnson on that play. I felt like Anthony Walker was in great position to where he almost got a hand on it, and he was the blurred vision. Remember we talked about that last week. Not enough blurred vision. More of that. The ball to Rudolph that Kenny Moore deflected. The ball to Thielen that Xavier Rhodes broke up as well. Blurred vision. You just did not have that. So, good work there. And then offensively, you just were committed. You were committed to running it. It was, the high school quarterback that can't throw. It was Navy's offense without the wishbone. Yeah. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And just, we put too much on Philip Rivers' plate. Let's not do that. And it's not every week you won't face this D-line. But against this D-line, you could do that.
Yep. Jenny wants to know, what Colts team are we looking at this year? The one that showed up week 1 against the Jaguars or the Vikings? And why can't we seem to get consistent play over the last several years?
Jenny, is there a more week 2 question in the NFL? Which team are we? The team literally everyone asks it. I trust me. The whole car ride home, I'm like, what Colts team is this? Now, as far as your second question, Jenny, why can't the Colts get consistent play over the last few years? Well, that's pretty simple. This team has been a mediocre football team. When you miss the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years, it's because you're inconsistent and you're mediocre and you just aren't a great football team. But yeah, getting back to your first point, I think we're going to get to November, Chris, and I still expect the Colts to be over 500. And, hopefully for their sake, a couple of games over 500. And I don't think I'm going to be able to have a lot of, like, this is the team we'll see atop the AFC South at the end of the year. This is the team that can do things in January. I just don't think we will get, what's the best barometer? What's the best measuring? Are the Bears any good? Or have they just played just gotten lucky in pulling out those wins the first 2 weeks? That's it. I mean, the Lions don't look any good. I thought they'd be halfway decent. Bengals, Browns, that speaks for itself. So I think they're more like the Vikings, the team we saw, but I've been fooled by this defense before. We were fooled by it in Kansas City and Arrowhead last year. Right. That wasn't the norm. Where I'm worried right now moving forward is depth. You're starting to lose. I mean, we're talking running back 1, wide receiver 2, tight end 1, tight end 2, various injuries, obviously, and severity and whatnot. But I guess luckily you haven't hit trenches. That's where you've stayed healthy. O-line and D-line have stayed pretty healthy. But I think they're more like the Vikings. But, like I said earlier, the Colts, I expected them to be 1-1 after the first 2 weeks. Here they are. I tend not to get away from my win-loss prediction too early in the season. I think that's kind of dangerous. And so far, I'm going to stay there.
Dalton wants to know if you thought that Jonathan Taylor looked a little nervous or stiff yesterday, because he believes that once Taylor loosens up and the game starts slowing down, he could be one of the best running backs in the league.
Well, shit. I mean, stiff and 100 yards. I'll take that, man. Yeah, I will sign me up for that. How long did the Colts go without a 100-yard rusher a few years ago? That was some real stiff running backs and stiff offensive lines then. Dalton, I get where he's going with this question. There were maybe a few times where he missed a little bit of a hole or could have had a bigger run, but, I thought yesterday was, again, it was the 230-pound Jonathan Taylor, not the 4.3 40-yard, and that's what makes him so freaking good.
Right.
He can hit you with a couple of different ways, like you said, Chris, falling forward on a routine basis. So,
and that juke.
Oh, yeah, that was a corner, too. Holton Hill. Yeah, that was man, pick up the laundry there. Yeah, maybe a little bit, but first NFL start, 100 yards. I'm not going to nitpick, man.
Colts fan in Cincy wants to know, with Campbell and Hooker going down, who are the best available free agents whom would fit the Colts' respective schemes?
Yeah, it's probably going to be a popular question. Campbell, to me, Chris, is the one more I'm thinking of. That's what you're missing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the slot. That's the gadgety guy. We saw them jet sweep it with Ashton Doolin late in the game. They don't trust Doolin as a receiver to throw him out there in that role.
Right.
Who's a free agent? Slot wideout. People will turn off the pod once they hear the name.
Who are you going with here?
Chester.
That's true.
I know it sounds crazy, but he's earned some level of trust with this coaching staff before. It's Marcus Johnson. He's out there, obviously. It's not a great. I was looking through the free agent wideout list, and again, not a lot of slot guys, which that's what you got to look for.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor Gabriel is a name. I'm like, oh yeah, and then I'm like, wait, he opted out. That's, you got to think about that as well with some of these guys. So there is a slot wideout into Michael Harris on the practice squad, an undrafted kid that I thought had some moments in camp, but it just seems like this is going to be a by committee sort of thing. It does. I would look into the Chester Rogers thing. I know, that will make people want to puke, but welcome to injuries in the NFL. Yeah. You just don't have the depth. This is not Clemson and Alabama where the next 5-star will slide in there. Is it Hines a little bit more in the slot? I don't know. He didn't play a whole lot of running back yesterday, and Wilkins did his usual thing there. Safety-wise, Tavon Wilson started, I think, a ton of games last year in the NFL. George Odom, I think, has played well when he's gotten in the mix. Obviously, Blackmon. And there's a veteran safety on the practice squad. I forget his name. I'm going to look it up. I think it's something Campbell, who started in the NFL before as well. So that would be a route.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you've got some depth at safety.
Okay. That's fair.
That's it. Anybody else I miss?
No.
In the question?
Nope.
Let me see if I can find that safety. Yeah, Ibrahim Campbell.
Okay.
Been in the league for 6 years. Again, in this whole practice squad round that you're in, former 4th-round pick. So this is a guy that at least has some experience in the league.
Right.
Of 53 games of experience. So, yeah, got some options, a little bit more in-house.
Sticking with the injuries, IU fan in Texas has a question about thoughts on the impact of shortened camp and no preseason has had on these injuries around the league.
I don't know how you can't. I don't know how you can't say that hasn't. We had Jeff Saturday on earlier today, and I kind of asked him, is this kind of a lockout feel? Did you have a lot of injuries back coming out of the lockout in 2011? Now, remember, that year you still had a normal preseason.
Right.
You still had I think a big thing that was missing from camp was the joint practices. That intensity level is ramped up. It's a different color jersey.
Right.
Guys inevitably go harder in that. So I'd put that there as well. I saw in Peter King's Monday Morning Quarterback today, he mentioned how Austin Eckler was doing pull-ups at like a playground. You take your kids to the playground and literally doing chin-ups, pull-ups, whatever, on the monkey bars during COVID. So it's just these guys aren't under your watchful eye. Darius Leonard took all the, weightlifting equipment from his high school. It's different. Mm-hmm. So it was alarming yesterday, man, following the games on Twitter and obviously watching the Colts, just seeing how many injuries there were. So hopefully this is not the trend, or else, man, relying on your depth and just survival of a 16-game season will be the name of the game this year.
This question comes from the great one, and it's regarding Nyheim Hines, and we do have a good amount of Hines questions this week for the podcast. Is he going to be special teams only now?
No. I mean, this is Frank Reich doing Frank Reich things. It's changing up weekly game plans. It's making, now the Jets this week, they have to prepare heavily for Jonathan Taylor, and then they're like, oh, gosh, Nyheim Hines touched it 15 times in week one. Mm-hmm. Some of the red zone stuff I'd probably like to see. Hines a little bit more involved, get some more creativity there and the two-back stuff that we've talked about before. But, this is a game where you were in full control of the run. You weren't going up tempo. You weren't passing a lot. You weren't going hurry up, so Hines isn't going to play as much.
Yeah.
So, I have, 9 snaps. Expected a little bit more, certainly, but game flow dictates a lot, and I like Frank Reich's creativity, and I still expect Hines to have a big role offensively throughout various games this season.
Jody wants to know what's your take Okereke outsnapping Walker by a large margin. Do you think that's just a natural evolution since they love Okereke so much, or do you think it was due to last week's defensive performance?
That was a big number.
Yeah.
Big number. It was 46-30. Okereke outsnapping Walker. Boy, total flip from week one.
Yeah, it was.
I was surprised week one we didn't see Okereke on the field more. I know the Vikings got behind. They had to throw it a little bit, but still, they ran it. It was still a 2-possession game for a large chunk of the second half. This is something that I'll be curious to monitor as the weeks move along, of when they talk about not enough defensive playmaking, things like that. Did they want more of the athletic Okereke on the field to maybe close up some of those zone gaps and things like that? He had 3 tackles. I didn't notice him a whole lot. He was pretty physical, I thought, at times in the run game. I think Walker only had 1 tackle. That'll be something to keep an eye on moving forward.
This question comes from Dara. Frank Reich says that was the blueprint of how they want to play, but do you think they'll have the patience to stick with the run game against the high-scoring Ravens or Texans, etc.? Also, when are we starting the Kenny Moore Appreciation Club?
Hell, we've already done it.
Yeah.
You got to get started over there in Ireland, Darg. That's where we got to get started over there. Very Kenny Moore-like performance from him yesterday. That's a good point on the higher scoring games. And this is what I get back to a lot. It's the week-to-week game plans. What is going to get you the win this week? You're playing Minnesota. No one expected them to score a whole lot. Their defensive line, interior-wise, is extremely weak right now. They've had guys opt out, guys get hurt, whatnot. So pound it. That was the recipe for this week. It's not going to work every week, and you've obviously – the biggest disappointment non-Hilton division through 2 weeks is what you've done situationally. Red zone and third down has been terrible. Again, that's usually a Frank Reich staple, so I'm not – I think that'll eventually get worked out, but it's really been an issue. It's why Minnesota hung around way too long yesterday than they should have. I'm not – there's an element of, you play keep away in those games, and then you realize you got to score. If you can finish off drives, you can afford to have Yersay's blueprint, but still, you're going to have to evolve from a vertical passing offense to beat Baltimore, Kansas City, hell, Buffalo.
Yeah, true.
Who looks pretty good early on.
All right, it's week 2. Dr. Digglesworth, are the Colts going to the Super Bowl?
God, yeah, I love fandom. I love it. We have one great NFL fandom, any fandom. I love fandom.
Last week, should we tank? This week, we going to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, and I think there might be a tanking one in here that I threw in here because it was still from last week, but there is literally nothing more beautiful than week 1 to week 2 in the NFL, how quickly things can change. And I'm sorry, I don't know, unless we see it one way or the other, there will be individual takeaways here early on in the season. I guess if they look really, really bad, that won't be good. But if they look great, it's still just going to be where are they at measuring sticks? I mean, there's a good chance. We're 2 weeks into the season. The Colts won't play a single playoff team in the first 7 games. Maybe Chicago. I don't know. Maybe this is them. But there's a legit chance of that. Then you look at the back half.
Right.
And it's playoff team every single week almost.
Cash Considerations has a Mo Alley Cox question. Again, another big topic this week for the podcast.
I should have mentioned him earlier. Sorry about that. I should have mentioned Mo in the old rookies. Go ahead with the question.
Big Mo had a good game post the drop interception. Was he running the same routes that Doyle does and presumably Burton would, or did you notice any set runs differently for the big target? Curious if his skill set dictates what plays are called more so than a vet like Doyle.
I probably noticed a little bit more vertical. Balls just kind of down the field a little bit more. Who asked that question again?
Cash Considerations.
Yeah, a little bit more vertical stuff. I love getting Mo the ball on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell wants to tackle him?
Yeah, go big man.
I mean, good for Anthony Harris going low, but that was a big play. His skill is a little bit different than Doyle, and I think he can be a little bit more of, I climb the ladder and go get it. They're similar build height-wise, but Mo obviously has the power forward body more to him, and we saw that play on the goal line, or near the goal line. It was probably a 20-yard play, something like that. A play that I loved. Rivers just lobbed one up on a 3rd and 5, and Alley Cox literally just boxed his guy out.
Yeah.
And it was a slow, is that ball ever going to get there? I'm like, what? Oh, yeah. There's that dude that used to play at VCU.
His hands almost fit entirely around the football when he's holding him both up there.
Massive hands. I went back and actually read my article from Colts.com when he first signed with the franchise, and I kind of forgot some of the stuff in there. He signed right before the draft started as, I guess, an undrafted free agent because he had redshirted at VCU, so he was technically eligible for the draft. He had been, in the league for 3 years or in college for 3 years. And Jimmy Ray, who was a Ryan Grigson VP of player personnel at the time, was a big kind of advocate for making that signing of getting Mo Alley Cox in here. And I couldn't believe yesterday, and Mo told the story earlier in the week, your 2 top tight ends yesterday, Mo Alley Cox, Noah Tungiai, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 played against each other. I don't think Noah got in the game, but he was on the bench in the first round of the NCAA tournament in 2016.
That's a great tidbit.
Tungiai was the Mo Alley Cox of the scout team for Oregon State as they prepped for VCU in round 1. Now, Mo Alley had 20-8, so it didn't really work out well for the Oregon State Beavers. But just good for Oregon State making the NCAA tournament in basketball because usually they suck.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, just how crazy is that? That's where you're at tight end depth-wise. 2 former basketball players. And Noah eventually played college football, but still, it's just kind of a funny story there of where you were at. I thought Mo did a great job bouncing back from the drop. That could be demoralizing for him. He's got to be better there. Use that frame. Great play by Harrison Smith, showing why he's one of the better safeties in the league, but still. And Rivers, Wright told us after the game how Rivers came to the staff this week and was like, I trust Mo. Give him chances. I trust him. And I thought you saw that. And with all these skill injuries, Chris, you're going to need Mo Alley Cox. And when Trey Burton gets back here in a couple of weeks, seemingly, you need him as well. Doyle doesn't seem like he's going to be out that long. So, yeah, great work from Mo.
This one comes from Zach. Looks like the Colts will have 2 roster spots open. Do you think this is maybe a place where they take a chance and bring in a veteran, or stay young, or promote from the practice squad?
So far, they've kind of been more practice squad based, which they have some options there as well. If I saw a veteran, I think it'd be at receiver more than safety.
Varys asks, do you think it's over for Malik Hooker as a Colt? They already declined his 5th-year option, and then after the Achilles injury, Blackmon comes in and had an immediate impact.
A lot of questions on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think that's the last snap. We just saw it. I do. And this is I was obviously an advocate for picking up his option. Small, non-guaranteed as well. I thought it was pretty low risk there. But this is why. I mean, he's struggled to stay healthy. The basketball frame is kind of a high school guy. Only played for 1 season at Ohio State. So how much was his durability there? And it got banged up in that 1 season there. I don't know. Maybe it's like a Mac thing and you get him on the shorter term deal here, more manageable, but there's a little bit more writing on the wall that would suggest otherwise than the Marlon Mack situation.
Dalton wants to know, is Blackmon a future star?
It's 32 snaps. I can't go there yet, but I like what I saw. I really did. And when I saw him on film in college, Chris, I was more intrigued the more I watched. But to me, it was all just about the ACL. That's what kind of worried me.
Yeah.
Do guys come back from it? Obviously, Hooker has struggled in that department. But you love the versatility. You love the instincts. Didn't look timid to me at all out there. He's got just kind of a Kari Willis swagger to him, I think, of, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to trust it. And more often than not, I'm going to be around the ball.
Yeah. I love that pick. Just seeing him and Willis back there, it's like this could be the future.
Right. And I mean, that could be Sunday.
Yeah.
405.
Right.
I mean, literally, you could be Marlon Mack, Malik Hooker, the 2 biggest question marks you probably had of individual guys in contract years. Both have torn their Achilles. It's looking like after 2 games of the season. And now, we had talked about how much is Blackmon going to play as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
You might put him in the Taylor Pittman category now as guy you need big time.
This comes from Jeff. What's up with T.Y.? Not on the field much for a number 1. Isn't hurt, and the drops.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jeff, it's a good question. Obviously, we talked about the play counts earlier. It was all run commitment. I don't think that was T.Y.'s in the doghouse. It was, no, Pascal and Pittman are good blockers, or at least we think they are. We're going to put them out there. So, yeah, and I guess I go back to what I said earlier about my concern with Hilton. It's just this is him healthy.
Mm-hmm.
When do the nicks and bruises start to happen for an NFL season? So, does he continue to create the amount of separation that he has so far?
This one comes from Alex, who loves the podcast. He thinks based on week 1, we saw the Colts' vision of Campbell being a wide receiver 2 for the season. Who do you think steps into that role if he misses an extended period of time? Pascal, Pittman?
See, that's the thing, Chris. I just don't think it's, boom, Zach Pascal takes Paris Campbell's role. Michael Pittman takes Paris Campbell's. They aren't the same body types. They're not the same speed. They don't have the same skill set. They just don't. They can help you out, and they'll do some stuff in the slot, but they're not going to give you what Campbell does. Jet sweeps, screens, vertical, put the ball in his hands and let him run. That's what you really miss. So, yeah, maybe a mix of Hines. I don't know. Do you trust Doolin at all?
Yeah, he's just different.
It's a huge loss. It is a huge loss if he is going to be out for however long he's going to be out.
This comes from Wood. Why the reverse popularity in player distribution / play calling on offense, i.e. no Hines?
That's Frank Reich for you. I mean, it's and there's a level of unpredictability that I think we should appreciate. I know, I don't know, maybe everyone has Nyheim Hines on their fantasy team and they were pissed and like, oh, I'm in a PPR league. What the hell? This is kind of Frank Reich. Like, this is what we're used to. There are weeks. I mean, how many times has Belichick, whatever, Jonas Gray is going to carry it 30 times, and then next week he's going to be benched. I mean, it's just, guys are active one week and they're inactive the next week. This is part of the NFL and just offensive creativity. Did I think it would be this stark? No, but I tried to caution people last week of when Marlon Mack has been hurt in years past, it hasn't all of a sudden meant Nyheim Hines, his role skyrockets.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't. Sunday was another example of that.
This question comes from Keith. Jack Doyle has been more than reliable when on the field, but after seeing what Mo was capable of, doesn't that bring a different aspect to the offense that Jack just doesn't bring?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And diversify your skill, guys. Diversify skill sets. We love the multiple tight ends here in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
So this is good. This is, Mo Alley-Cox, I think, struggled at times as a route runner. That's what I think held him back from playing a little bit more. But certainly vertically down the field. I mean, what do you have, 111?
Yeah, leading receiver by far.
22 yards per catch?
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was a screen? And, balance. I mean, his long was 33. It's not like he had a long of 60. He just was – let me see if I can find his other catches.
Yeah, he was very consistent.
33, 27, 21, 16, and 14.
Talk about chunk plays.
That's not a 5-yard tight end running a button hook. I mean, that's providing some big plays for you. So, yeah, I mean, certainly it offers, and that's no knock on Doyle. Doyle brings a whole lot to this team. It's just diversify, baby.
Mm-hmm. This question comes from Tom. Do you think the Colts regret not upgrading the cornerback spot more this year? He's still not confident in Rhodes, and although they couldn't predict Tell opting out, feels like this group is a little shaky other than Kenny Moore, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, you and I are on the same page there. I think they should regret that. But I thought TJ Carey gave you some good minutes yesterday, and that was needed as an outside corner with Rock Yassin. But, yeah, I've said that many times, and when you play more pass-happy offenses that have a more complete wideout set, you're going to be tested with this outside cornerback group.
Travis absolutely loved Jonathan Taylor's running style and thinks he's going to continue to improve. What do you see JT finishing the season at statistically if he continues to stay healthy?
Well, I mean, definitely eclipsing 1,000 yards. Yeah. I mean, he had, 20 in week 1. He had 100 and something in week 2, so that's...
Yeah, 101 yesterday.
120-ish divided by 2 times 16. He's on pace for 960. Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be over 1,000 yards, yeah.
This comes from Scott. Do you think part of the Colts' struggle so far this year on third down in the red zone has a little to do with Trey Burton not being in there?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Scott. And that's what I worry about with Campbell. Just the pre-snap motion of he's moving in this direction, and oh my gosh, where's 15? 15 comes on the field, you're like, oh gosh. Make sure we have an eye on him.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I thought the Colts did a nice job kind of doubling Adam Thielen at times. That just popped into my head.
I agree.
They did a good job there, especially in the red zone. So, yeah, I think Burton, we've talked about, I think he'll be a third down red zone weapon for this team. And just you need more skill talent. You need it. You need it. We know Frank or what's his name? Phillip Rivers has played with some bigger targets. Frank talked about that. Mo Alley-Cox fits that mold, the bigger target.
Sure.
We saw Phillip use that really well.
Tommy enjoys the win, but he still can't help wonder why there were no defensive adjustments made during the Jags game, seeing that they could easily now be 2-0.
Another question. We got quite a bit. Tommy, spot on here.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so maddening and I go back to something Frank Reich talked about in the offseason. He really harped on how he needs to improve as a coach. So I asked him that. I'm like, okay, specifically, what do you mean? And he talked about him as a play caller, saying when we get into ruts offensively, where are my go-to situations to get us out of ruts? No huddle, a screen, finding door. I don't know, whatever. The same thing defensively. When you're getting shredded, what can you turn to? Do you have multiple things within your scheme, playbook, game plan, whatever that you can turn to? This is a bunch that should be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
You brought back everybody personnel-wise that mattered besides Jabal Sheard and Pierre Desir. And DeForest Buckner should be on the same page, and Xavier Rhodes shouldn't be that far off. It's like the Kansas City game last year. You played so well, and then you never really saw that again the rest of the season, or at least not that much. So now I want to see was week 1 the ultimate wake-up call? Was that the ultimate wake-up call?
This question's from Chris, who's a lifelong Colts fan living in California and a fan of the podcast. He's super excited about the play of the rookie class this week, but he also has another question like we talked about with free agency. On the defensive side of the ball, are there any realistic free agent corners or safeties that you could see Ballard going after?
It's a good question, Chris. Appreciate you, and obviously thoughts to everyone out in California right now, dealing with a whole different animal out there. So appreciate you tuning in. I think when we look at safety, Chris, a lot will depend on what you think of Blackmon.
Right.
If you think Blackmon can handle it, I mentioned the depth you have there. You have better depth there than you do at corner. Everyone's tweeting at me about Eric Barrett. Clinton Dix, I think, is still a free agent. Clayton Geathers is a free agent. It's like, are you guaranteeing much playing time? Eric Reed's of the world, those sorts of things. It's kind of like the working out Lamar Miller last week. That's probably only for a Jonathan Taylor injury.
Right.
Corner-wise, we've gone over some of the names. Tremaine Johnson, Prince of Mukamara, I think Tremont Williams is there. Ross Cockrell's there. It's an older group. Claiborne, I think, is one of them as well. But still, if you're healthy with Rhodes, you've seen Carey now outside. I don't see the Colts turning there just yet.
All right, 3 more Twitter questions. This one's Forged in Blue. They have a hot take. Blackmon has now taken the spot from Hooker and won't give it back. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if he's torn his Achilles, I don't know how hot that is.
Right.
That sounds like Rosie's bottle that I put in the warmer and then used the bathroom, and I'm in the bathroom for too long, and the bottle's not very warm anymore. Yeah, that's not very hot to me. Like I said earlier, I think there's a good chance Malik Hooker's played his final snap with the Colts.
All right, here's that tank question we talked about. This comes from Ryan from
And to be
Chicago.
fair, Chris, this was sent in before Sunday.
Yes, yep.
But I did want to make sure that we slid it in. I try to get to everybody's question either on Monday or Wednesday's podcast.
If the Colts were to continue to struggle, should they consider tanking? It seems like an absolute perfect opportunity with so many fans choosing not to watch for personal reasons and the stadium being empty due to COVID and Trevor Lawrence being there at the top. If there was ever a time to quietly sneak into a tank season, this would be the time. And it could still be fun. Just throw in Eason, see what he can do. I know you paid Phillip Rivers, but sustained success seems to be a better choice.
I love the line, quietly sneak in the tank season. Is that a thing? Can you do that?
You fly under the radar of mediocrity.
No one's watching us on CBS or Fox, I actually laugh a little bit at the question, but I think there's a lot of valid points in here. Now, I will preface by saying there's no chance that they will tank. This is just a totally different side of thinking than Chris Ballard or Jim Irsay or Frank Reich will have. But still, there are a lot of good points about the sustained success. I do think it would be fun to watch Jacob Eason try and grow up.
Mm-hmm.
There's different types of fun. That wouldn't be fun on the win-loss column, but if you're able to hit on it, 3-13 for Peyton year one wasn't fun, but you watch growth of the guy that now is a statue in front of the stadium, and obviously Eason is not in that class, but it's something we just have never done here. If I'm the Chargers, I'm kind of like, oh, Tyrod, don't rush back, you know? Justin Herbert, let's see what more is there. That can be enjoyable to a degree for a fan base. So it's not going to happen, Ryan. I agree with you, though. It's not the worst year in the world to be drafting top 5, top 10,
nope.
But I don't expect the Colts to be there at all.
And last one for this Monday edition of the podcast is from Isaac. Is Pittman going to be used as more of a decoy than an actual threat, given his difficulty with NFL adjustments?
Yeah, and this was thrown in there as well before Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, he can't be a decoy. You just don't have enough depth at receiver, especially if Campbell's going to miss time. And, again, Phillip Rivers, we saw the miscommunication from those two on that one red zone out route. But Rivers trusts the dude. I mean, target him 4 times on 3rd down in the red zone in the first half and 4 catches for Pittman there. So, Pittman is – the Michael Pittman I've seen the first 2 weeks is better than the Michael Pittman I saw in training camp. I know the penalties, he's got to get – those have been weird, the crackbacks and all that stuff. But so far, good work from a guy that I felt pretty safe about when you drafted him.
All right. Well, that wraps up Twitter questions for this edition.
Cool. Yeah, we'll probably got 10 or 15 more that we'll get to on Wednesday. If you guys have any more, throw them into the DM. And like we did with last week's pods, expect this sort of time frame really throughout the year. Certainly there'll be times that Chris and I got to adjust a little bit, but it works for us, and we hope that you guys are at least getting this early on a Monday and then kind of get your preview pod Wednesday afternoon. He's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week, and 1-1. We'll preview Colts Jets on Wednesday.